I'm a reference librarian here at Brooklyn Law School. The reference to that will be assisting in the program today. They'll be helping you upstairs in some interactive workshops. We hope you'll be highly participatory during all of our sessions today, but particularly during that session. We're going to start the program with an overview of research skills and research methodology. Professor Carrie Teicher, who you might know already, is going to be leading us off in that vein. Following Professor Teicher's presentation, we will make our way upstairs to the 11th floor where we have several workshops set up. You should feel free to attend each of the workshops. We have a workshop on finding treatises and using the library catalog. We have one on secondary sources and legal periodicals, case law research, statutory research, and administrative law research. This will be accompanied by a coffee, soda, and cookie refreshment stage. So feel free to go around all of the workshops, participate in them, and help yourself to some coffee, soda, or cookies. That will take us to about 4:15. We'll ask you to come down here again for a final lecture and presentation by Brooklyn Law School alum Janice Henderson, who is Director of Information Services at Baker McKenzie and coordinates the research efforts at all of their offices around the globe. And she is going to speak to you about cost-effective research approaches in a law firm setting and things that you might, well, you won't see in a law school setting, but you will see as you make your transition to a practice area. So she will be speaking at 4:30. That'll take us to about 5:15. It's a 45-minute presentation. Following that, LexisNexis has generously given us quite a sum of money to host a wine reception and beer reception until about 6 o'clock. So you should make your way back up to the 11th floor if you want to have a mixer. So I think we will, on that note, we will start. Oh, one other comment. Some of you who are attending as a requirement of a clinic program, there is a sign-up sheet in the back if you want your attendance sheet, and make sure you sign that sheet before you leave for the day. And on that note, presentation.
Hi everybody, I'm Carrie Teicher.
A little louder?
A little louder, okay. I'm Carrie Teicher. I teach first year legal writing, advanced writing, drafting, PR commercial here. I invite all of you to sign up for my drafting class as you move on into your second and third years. It's a class which covers a whole range of writing, including some advanced research skills, which Ricky comes in to teach in the class. So I look forward to seeing any one of you in my classes in the years to come. Today's session is really meant to give you a general overview excuse me, of basic research skills. Anything more advanced you'll be doing upstairs, and certainly you can direct your questions to Vicki and her very well-versed library staff. A lot of this may seem very fundamental, or in fact, maybe as though you're seeing it for the first time. When was the last time you opened a digest? When was the last time you looked at an ALR? What's an ALR? Many of you, it's not a test. I encourage participation. I have any questions at all in the course of this presentation. A little bit of this is kind of hokey, but it's some things to hold your interest. Any questions, please just jump right in. I'll take them from the audience, and feel free to participate. You may be some very familiar sounds here. If you recognize them, all the better. If you don't recognize them, I'm just showing my age, I guess. There's one of them. What show?
LA Law.
LA Law, yes, LA Law. I came of age during this show. Any of you saw the movie last week or 2 weeks ago? It wasn't particularly good. But nevertheless, I thought I'd introduce some of the music to you. The big question here, of course, is are you ready for your summer research? Believe it or not, you are. Your skills are in place. You got them in your first year. You have the textbook. Many of you had textbooks in the first year that you looked at, believe it or not. Feel free to open them again in doing your research for your jobs. Now, legal research, as you know, is an ongoing process. jurisdiction. What jurisdiction are you in? Are you in federal courts? Are you in state courts? What's the area of law? Is it contracts? Is it torts? Is it federal practice? Is it tax? Any one of a number of topics. What are the particular fact situations involved in your particular case? Is there a particular relationship involved between the parties, for example? Is it an employer and employee situation? A government and a governmental agency and various citizens that are involved in that particular agency? What is the relationship? Is there a question of timing? How long ago did the problem arise? Are we seeking equitable relief? Are we seeking injunctive relief? Are we seeking compensatory damages, punitive damages? All these things go into your issue identification. That's the first step. Now, many of you may be working for an office, and you'll be handed a file, and you'll say, here's the file. Go do the research. You don't even know what's in the file. Of course, the first thing you do is go through the file, and you'll have to take notes and say, wait a minute, what's going on here? Who are these parties? Where am I? What court am I in? What is the issue as I see it? Of course, you know the basic sources of law. What are they? Very basic. Statutes, cases, treatises. What's a treatise? That's a secondary source. We have cases, we have constitutions, right? The constitutional law, statutes, and very important, especially for those of you doing any kind of federal work this summer, administrative regulations. Anybody working for the SEC, anybody working for the federal government in any capacity, you may be coming across a whole assortment of federal regulations, administrative regulations. So the primary authority, the main sources of law come from statutes, cases, and administrative regulations. Now, you know also from your first year of law school, there are different types of research tools. What's primary authority? We just said, what's primary authority? Cases, statutes, administrative regulations. What's secondary authority?
Treaties.
I'm sorry? Law review articles, treatises. Anything else? American law reports. Anything else? The statements. Okay. All secondary authority. Then we have the finding tools. What are the finding tools? What are the finding tools? Digests and the citators, the shepherds. Right? Those are the finding tools. And last, and but not least, of course, is computer research or legal research. Many of you may expect and hope that this is all the research you'll be doing in your law office this summer. But in fact, for most of you, you're going to be going back to the books. You'll be shocked to learn that you're not going to have ready access to the computers, or if you are, you're going to be warned about excessive use of the computers. So we're going back to books here. Using computers certainly will help, but the books really become very important once again. And you thought you'd never see the inside of a book again, but what is your goal as a legal researcher? What is your goal? What's your goal? What? Watch Mission Impossible. What's your goal? What are you finding? What are you looking for? Primary authority. Your main goal as a researcher is to locate primary authority. Ultimately, that's what you're going to need. Secondary sources are wonderful and terrific, but ultimately you're going to be relying on the primary authority to make your case, to write your memo, to make your argument. Okay, so that is your ultimate goal as a legal researcher. Of course, where is primary authority located? We all know that already, but just a quick review. We have cases. Cases are located in reporters, both official and unofficial. We have statutes. Statutes, and the federal statutes and the state statutes. The federal code, the United States Code annotated, United States Code, and the state statute in New York, McKinney's Consolidated Laws of New York. Is anybody here going to be doing research outside the state of New York this summer? Outside. So whatever jurisdiction you're in, it'll have its version of the code, and you would research directly in that primary source. Okay, any questions? How do you find primary authority? way, and many of you are sort of accustomed to this already, is where you have a citation. Right? You have a citation, you go to the site, you go to the books. But chances are you're not going to have much of that. You will first go to the secondary sources to help locate primary authority. And of course, once you have some tangible piece of primary authority, you can also go to the various finding tools. Okay, you can go to the digest, you can go to various tools you can use to locate other cases. But not all cases are equal. And you know that. Not all cases are equal. It's very important when you look at a citation to recognize what court you're coming from, what court the case comes from, and you have to keep in mind which cases are binding. Of course, opinions from the highest court are always binding on the lowest court, and lower courts are bound by higher courts. It's the flip side of that. Statutes and regulations are binding. And lastly, United States Supreme Court cases are binding on issues of federal law and issues of state law as it relates to the particular state that you're in, right? If you're in a state court, the Supreme Court decision on issues of state law. Okay, but otherwise, it's very important to keep these things in mind. You can't just look at a case and say, I'm going to use it. You have to see what jurisdiction it's coming from. Everything else is persuasive. Right? What is persuasive? That which is not binding, right? So you have secondary sources, treatises, law review articles, the restatements are certainly persuasive. Opinions from other jurisdictions are persuasive, and various other lower courts. Now, a lot of students get confused about this in New York. If you're, let's say, in the appellate division, okay, so you're in the second department, and you have a case from the appellate division first department, is it binding or persuasive? It's persuasive only. It is not binding. Okay, so courts at the same level would be persuasive only, not binding. Okay, if you're in the second department and you find a case in the first department that conflicts with a case in the third department, you have to make an argument. Which argument, which case should your jurisdiction adopt? Ultimately, the New York Court of Appeals would resolve that difference. But cases at the same level are persuasive only. Any question about that? The West Reporter System, you know the West Reporter System, that ungodly system down in the library, all the books, all those horrible big books that are there. It looks the same. Of course, this is where the cases come from. We have the unofficial reporters, you know that. We have the unofficial regionals, Pacific, Atlantic, Northeast, Northwest, etc. We have the unofficial state reporters. New York State, New York Supplement is the unofficial reporter for the state of New York. California has its own unofficial reporter as well, but you have to keep in mind which system you have. You know, the official or the unofficial, you want to go to the unofficial reporters. Why? Because those are the reporters that contain the research tools you need to help you do your research. Federal reporters are technically unofficial in the sense that they have all the same research tools that unofficial reporters have, but there are no official or unofficial federal reporters. There's only one set of reporters. Okay? Now, the federal reporters, as you know, you have the reporter that contains decisions of the Circuit Court of Appeals, reporters that contain the decisions of the Federal Circuit Court of Appeals. Which are they? Reporters that contain decisions from the Federal Circuit Court of Appeals are contained, not in this report, in the federal report. Okay, a lot of students get confused. The federal reporter contains only those decisions from the United States Circuit Courts of Appeals. The Supreme Court reporter, SPCT, that's the unofficial reporter of the United States Supreme Court, that contains the cases from the United States Supreme Court only. The Federal Supplement contains decisions from the federal district courts only. And there's also something called Federal Rules Decision. Many of you will be working in a governmental agency or perhaps the U.S. Attorney's Office or doing some kind of federal research. The Federal Rules Decision contain decisions of the federal district courts as they relate only to rules of federal procedure. Listen to FRD, that's the reporter for the Federal Rules Decision of District Court cases on rules of federal procedure. And lastly, there are specialty reporters. Specialty reporters, such as the bankruptcy reporter, the tax reporter. These are district court cases as well. They're not circuit court of appeals cases, they're district court cases as well. Of course, as you know, there are the official reporters. And the United States Supreme Court cases appear in the U.S. reports. And by the way, for citation purposes, you know that the only site you need is the U.S. reporter. You should not be citing to the unofficial site. The Google requirement is such that it's the U.S. report. Okay, so we have the United States reports, and in New York, we have the 3 official reporters. We have the reporter for the New York Court of Appeals, N period, Y period. Cases from the New York Court of Appeals contain the New York reports. We have cases from the New York Appellate Division. New York Appellate Division, that contains decisions from all the 4 appellate departments in New York. And the official reporter for all lower level courts is the miscellaneous reporter. MISC, miscellaneous, district courts, family courts, Supreme Courts, an assortment of lower state courts appear here. Of course, all these cases also appear in the unofficial New York reporter known as the New York Supplement. Okay? So we have the official and the unofficial. For your research purposes, you will be using the unofficial reporters. They're the most effective, and they tell you these case summaries, head notes, key numbers, and all that stuff. But the official reporters, you may be citing. So you have to be aware of what they are. Every state, most states, I shouldn't say every state, most states have their own official reporters. Some states have adopted the unofficial regional reporters as their official reporters, but that's not what we know. Question? Yes.
United States reports is Supreme Court and Courts of Appeal?
No. United States reports is just the Supreme Court.
Where would you find federal appeals?
Federal Circuit Court of Appeals are in the Federal Reporter. Federal Reporter, and the citation for that would be F period 2D for second series, F period 3D for third series.
That's the unofficial law?
There's no official or unofficial, there's only one. But it looks like an unofficial reporter, it acts like an unofficial reporter, it does everything an unofficial reporter does because it's published by West.
There's no official report?
No, there's no official reporter, it's the only citation you need. But for the Supreme Court, you have an unofficial and official reporter. Any other questions on that? Now, this all doesn't help you very much unless you are able to correctly identify the issue that you're researching. Now, we talked about it briefly before, but once you get your feet wet, once you get into the materials that you need, you again have to revisit what it is you're researching. What jurisdiction? Is it federal, state? Maybe it's pendant jurisdiction, ancillary jurisdiction. Maybe there's a question of subject matter jurisdiction. Does the case even belong in federal court? You have to first establish a jurisdictional basis for your problem. Where are you? The area of law, of course, and the fact analysis. Okay? And this is a constant, ongoing process. Until your document, until what you're researching is complete, you are constantly researching. You are updating and checking and triple checking. Now, research is done by identifying words and phrases and search terms, which you know this when you first do legal research. You can't just sort of go and look for a generic search. You have to hone in on words and phrases that are principles the courts use. And you try different things. If one thing doesn't work, you try something else. You remember from the first year, if you do research under children, let's say, you may not find anything. But if you look at the word minors, you may find a whole host of things. So play with your search terms, play with your keywords and phrases. A lot of it's trial and error. Now, recent cases. This is something students forget about because students, for the most part, just do their work on the computers. But where do you find the most recent cases in hard copy? Okay. Very often, you're going to have to go locate those recent cases if the computer's not available. Now, the fairly recent cases appear in the advanced sheets. What are the advanced sheets? Anybody recalls? What are the advanced sheets? So it's a misleading name. I'm sorry? No, it's not the pocket part of the back of the book. Reporters don't have pocket parts, right? Reporters do not the very end. Those soft-covered books are called advanced sheets. It's a misleading name, but those are the advanced sheets. Those are the most recent cases as they are published in the reporters. But you also have even more recent cases that appear in slip opinions. Slip opinions are the opinions themselves issued by the courts, and they're slip opinions. They're little pieces of paper, slips. Ultimately, you have enough slip opinions, the publisher publishes them into the advanced sheets. Now, recent Supreme Court opinions, assuming you can't get them on the computer, can be gotten in the United States Law Week, USLW. The United States Law Week contains the decisions of the most recent Supreme Court decisions. And those are available in the library. Again, if the computer's not available, certainly the computer is the most efficient way of getting the most recent decisions. But barring that, you need to be familiar with these particular sources. Of course, there's no tried and true, but be careful. You may not have access. At least you may not have free access as you did as a student here at the Wall. So, going back to basics, how do we find primary authority? Frog. How do we find primary authority? If you have a citation, you're ahead of the game. If you don't have the citation, use secondary authority and use finding tools. Okay, that's the third time I said that, so I hope by now you will remember that when you get out into your summer job. Secondary authority is very useful, but there are some that are better than others. Okay? You should be familiar with the pros and cons of each. You may already, but they bear repeating. The encyclopedias are certainly useful, but I would not rely on them to the exclusion of anything else. They really are not all that reliable. Nevertheless, you have the Corpus Juris Secundum, the American Jurisprudence, and state encyclopedias. These are available on the computer, and you can access them on the computer as well, but barring that, again, if you don't have access, go to the encyclopedias. The secondary sources have what this gentleman referred to before as the pocket parts. Reporters do not contain the pocket parts, the secondary sources contain the pocket parts. You must get into the habit of checking pocket parts for everything. Sometimes the pocket part is not in the book because one of two reasons. Either the book is very new, it was just published, and at which point you see the publication date, 2002, you know that there's no pocket part. Or the pocket part is so big that it has to be published as a separate pocket part, so to speak, to the book, which will be right next to the book on the shelf. So if you don't see it in the book, don't just automatically dismiss it. Do a little detective work to make sure that it's not there. But it's very important to check. All right, you have the encyclopedias, the American law reports, and the law reviews, and the treatises. Okay, the treatises are very, very valuable. Those of you in doing any kind of federal practice this summer, Moore's federal practice, Wright and Miller, federal practice and procedure will be invaluable. It's very important to use the treatise. If you're really stuck, you don't understand a particular principle of law, you're in federal court, and it's a question of federal practice, go to the treatise. It's very, very compelling, it tells you the cases, and it's persuasive as well. And lastly, we have the restatements. Questions so far? I'm going to go into each one of these individually. The encyclopedia is like any encyclopedia. If you want to use them if you're at a complete loss. You don't understand the terms, you don't know the terms, you don't even understand the language or the area of law you're researching. The encyclopedia is a great place to go to just get your feet wet, to learn a little bit about what you're researching before you research. It's kind of a funny thing. You have to know the area of law you're researching before you actually do it, to make sure you're using the right terms. Well, how do you know that if you don't know the area of law that you're researching? The encyclopedias are a good way to get started. If you have a particular area of state law, don't go to Amjur, don't go to a general encyclopedia. It's better to go to a state encyclopedia. It's a more effective research. Never, 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 I don't care what people tell you, never cite to encyclopedias. There are other more persuasive things you can cite. If it's in the encyclopedia, chances are there's a statute or a case you can cite. So you will never cite the encyclopedia. It's there for your purposes as a researcher only. certainly were going to be persuaded by an encyclopedia. And of course, check the pocket parts. In particular with the encyclopedias, because very often the volumes are old, and the pocket parts are very good. So be very careful about use of the encyclopedia, but again, if you don't know anything about the area of law you're researching, it's a great way to get started. And of course, if you do have access to the computer, they are available on the computers. Now the treatises, as I said before, are very compelling and very persuasive. I talked about Moore's Federal Practice. Good source for in-depth discussion of an area of law. And what's nice about the treatise, they're written by scholars, they're written by notable experts in the field, and you can read them with a very high comfort level, knowing that you're finding what you need. So it's a good source for an in-depth discussion of the area of law that you're researching. It cites, much like encyclopedias, of course, it cites to primary authority, and you will see the primary authority cited in the footnotes or the endnotes, wherever they're located, statutes and or cases. And they too are updated with pocket parts, with supplements. Be very careful to check the most recent version of the pocket parts and supplements. And again, can be found in Westlaw and Lexis. What's nice about the treatises, though, if you really don't know anything about an area of law, you can't cozy up to a computer, but you can cozy up to a book. You just take the book, sit yourself down, and flip through the pages, and you can get a general overview of the whole area of law that you're researching. You can't do that on a computer. At least, I don't know, maybe I'm too old, maybe you can, I don't know, but I can't. I need to really sit down with the book sometimes, just sort of flip through the pages to get a sense of the whole picture. Okay, so I really urge you to consult the treatises as often as you can. And of course, unlike the encyclopedia, you can cite the treatises. They are persuasive. And of course, you take them at their face value. Now, legal periodicals are persuasive, but I would say they're probably less persuasive than the treatises, of course, depending on who the author is. Now, if you've written a note or a comment and you feel compelled to cite your own work to the court, that's nice. I'm not so sure the court will view it as particularly persuasive at this stage of the game, but, pick and choose who you're citing and why you're citing it. But the other purpose for the law review article is, again, to give you an overview, a general background of information in case you don't know anything about a particular area of law, or you're researching something that's perhaps a little controversial or cutting edge. And ultimately, again, our goal remember our Mission Impossible tape, our goal is to locate primary authority. We get stuck in this morass of secondary authority, but our goal ultimately is to find cases. Law reviews will cite the cases as well. You have a conflict in jurisdictions. If there's an area of law that's in dispute, law reviews are a good way of researching that area to see both sides of an argument, of a debate. Now, we locate the law review articles by going to the Index of Legal Periodicals or the Current Law Index. Again, these are available on the computer, but feel free to use those indices, again, particularly if your area of law is cutting edge, controversial, or undecided. Okay? And lastly, as with everything else, they are available on Lexis and Westlaw. Any questions? Now, the restatement, if I remember correctly from my days as a law student, I never looked at the restatement. Never did. But I subsequently found out that it was really quite a useful tool to give me, again, an overview of the law, a sense of what changes in the world, and again, restatements cite cases. So don't overlook the restatements as a good source of information to help you understand the law. Use it to search areas of the common law. You can locate all sorts of authority, mandatory or persuasive authority, and you can see which jurisdictions have adopted the restatement. Now, maybe your jurisdiction hasn't, maybe it's time your jurisdiction does. It depends on what you're researching. And lastly, again, as always, available on Westlaw and Lexis. The restatement, by the way, also has the supplements with pocket parts in the back, so make sure you check that. Now, the American Law Reports, the ALR, I find the ALR to be very, very, very valuable. The ALR will survey the law nationwide. Okay, it's the area of state law, you go to the ALR, the area of federal law, ALR federal. Okay. That was just the way to go. I think at this point in the game, he was starting to doze. So I took the drum roll. The ALR, again, is used to give an overview of the area of law that you're researching, but also to give you citations. Don't cite the ALR, by the way. It's not the most compelling source. Again, it's there for your purposes. There we go. What the most useful use of the ALR is to get cases from other jurisdictions that perhaps you can use as persuasive authority. Now, how have other jurisdictions dealt with similar issues? And it's a very useful source. You want to use the most recent ALR, ALR 3rd, 4th, and 5th, and ALR federal. Anything earlier than that, I would be very suspect to be careful with because things change very quickly. Any questions about the ALR? Very useful. It's sort of a hybrid. The ALR will contain a decision, let's say, pick and choose cases that it will actually contain, and then the annotation that follows it will survey the law nationwide on similar issues and lead you to cases from other jurisdictions. So you may find a case within the ALR, never cite to the ALR as a reporter though. Never cite to it as a reporter. You will cite to the official or unofficial reporter depending on what jurisdiction you're in. Now the finding tools. Our good old finding tools. Now we want to find things. How do we find things? We go to the other than to have a citation, of course, the digest. The good old digest. Now, just curious. By show of hands, not as you are, so please feel free to raise your hand. How many of you have not looked at a digest since fall semester first year? Whoa! Did you see that?
I did.
Did you see that? Astounding. Yes, it is astounding. The digest, I think, is probably the most underrated research tool out there, personally. I find it to be so useful. And students, after the first year fall semester, they never look at it again until they're out there working. And they're given a research task, and they have no clue what they're doing. They forget. And that's when I get my phone call. Professor Teicher, remember me from your first year legal writing class? I get these phone calls all the time over the summer. I say, yes. Well, I remember digest vaguely, but I kind of don't remember what they are. So don't forget the digests. They're very, very useful. There are state digests. There are federal digests. There is a Supreme Court digest, believe it or not. There is a digest just for the United States Supreme Court opinions. There is something called a combined digest known as the General Digest. I believe from 1991, is that right, to the present, the General Digest. It's called the General Digest. If you're researching prior to 91, it's the decennials, is that right? The digest gives you a ready source to the law that will jump start your research. Don't overlook the digest. The other finding tool, of course, which is very useful and very not useful. Not only is it useful, but failing to use it will be very detrimental and may even result in a very embarrassing situation. Be sure you shepherdize and key cite everything. Okay? So again, the finding tools, the finding tools, the digest, and shepherds. You don't start your researching with shepherds. You can start your researching, though, with the digest. Now, you remember, how do we get into the digest? Anybody? How do you start with the digest? What would you do? Yes? The index. What are you looking up in the index? Okay, words and phrases, perhaps. There's also a plaintiff defendant table. If you know the name of the case that you know is important, you can go to the plaintiff defendant table to look up a case and then sort of go through your research that way. But you want to go into the digest because the digest is an index of the law. It's really a very detailed index of every aspect of the law. There are subjects that are reprinted and arranged in alphabetical order. And if you remember head notes, the head note summaries of each cases, each principle of law is in the digest. By the way, this is an aside, those are the same headnotes that you find at the beginning of the case in the unofficial reporters. Right? The headnotes that you see in the case are the exact same headnotes you see in the West Digest. Each topic and area of law, each unique area of law has a topic and key number assigned to it. Remember that, those little key numbers? Every fine point of law has its own key number. Once you have a topic and key number in one digest, you can use the same topic and key number in any digest. So if you know of a case in New York and you're researching New Jersey law, you take the same topic and key number you can get from the unofficial reporter and go do your research in the New Jersey digest. So they're uniform throughout the system. Use topics and key numbers to locate cases. The first thing you want to do, as you correctly pointed out, you want to go to what's called the descriptive word index. And you don't know anything, you try different words and phrases, and you try to use them to help locate the topics and key numbers. Once you have those topic and key numbers, you go to the volume of the digest in which those topics and key numbers are contained. Is this all coming back to you? Does it sound vaguely familiar? At least those students that you had me, it should. It's not very good. It sounds vaguely familiar, right? Okay. Make sure you read the headnotes and make sure you read the pocket parts. The digest have pocket parts. If you don't read the pocket parts, you're going to be missing out on very key cases. You will check the pocket parts, check the headnotes, read the case, and decide if it's relevant. Never, ever, ever cite to the headnotes, never cite to a topic and key number, certainly, and never rely on a case unless you've read the case. Don't say, oh, it's in the headnote, this is a good case. You have to read the case to see if it's relevant, if it's appropriate, if it's jurisdictionally appropriate. You never know, maybe the procedural history of the case is such that it makes it different. And it wouldn't be persuasive for you. So you must read the case. But the digest gives you a quick jump start, summaries of the cases, and it gives you some basic information to help locate other cases. Now, we talked about the descriptive word index. There's also something called a table of cases in the digest. You can certainly use that. You can use the defendant-plaintiff table. And lastly, there is a words and phrases which provide citations to cases actually defining certain terms. Where the court said, defines what the particular area of the term that you're searching for. So there are different tables, different indices that the digest has. So, refamiliarize yourself with that. And again, there's a digest for almost anything in which is a reporter. There should be a digest. Is that correct? Would that be right? For any reporter, there is an equivalent digest.
Not exactly.
No? Okay, see, that's why they do that.
The Northeastern Reporter doesn't have its own digest.
Oh.
Which state are we interested in that would appear in the Northeastern Reporter? You live in it. Okay. New York cases appear in the Northeastern Reporter, but there is no Northeastern Digest. So what would you use as a finding tool to get into the Northeastern Reporter? What would you use? You use the New York Digest. The New York Digest will give you parallel sites in the Northeastern Reporter. The Southwestern Reporter also does not have a digest. You would have to use the state digest to access those cases. What types of cases appear in the regional reporters, do you know? They're the state cases, the highest court cases of each state. You don't use that as a federal report. A lot of students make that mistake. So you can use the state digest to get into the regional reporters as well as the regional digest.
Again, if you're researching federal law, there's a Federal Practice Digest. And if you're really honing in on Supreme Court law, there's a Supreme Court Digest. So feel free, don't overlook that particular search tool. It's very, very valuable. Okay, one warning about digests. Moving. Sure, thank you. You never cite a digest. You never rely on a headnote without reading the case. You never use the adopted some kind of uniform system of citation, but it's not a very good source. Okay, so digests are very, very good, very useful, but be careful how you use them, as with anything else. All right, now we found cases, we've done research with digests, we've done research with ALR and law reviews and everything else. Now we want to check our sources. We want to validate and update the case. We want to make sure the case is still good law. We want to find out if the case has been appealed. We also want to use the case we find to help us locate more cases or whatever other primary authority we're looking for. We want to see if other cases have dealt with similar issues. So there are many things we want to do once we find a good case. Are there similar cases to mine? Can I use them in writing my memo or brief? So we validate a case by making sure it's still good law, and we update it as well to find newer and more recent cases that are on point. Never, never submit anything unless you have updated and checked your sources. Of course, I'm sure many of you probably have not seen Shepard's in print again since your first year fall semester. Believe it or not, sometimes you'll have to use that in the law firm or governmental agency in which you're working. I will say this, that computers do Shepard's better than anything, and certainly you can access a computer to Shepardize and update and do that. Barring that, if you're Shepardizing in print, you have to be familiar with the traditional letters, the treatment codes, the history codes that appear in the citations. You remember those things. It's a little R, a little O, a little M's, a little J's. Make sense to you? You also want to use your headnote numbers. Remember that? The little subscripts, those little raised numerals when you're Shepardizing? You want to use those numbers to help you locate cases that are particularly on point to the area of law that you're researching. Of course, the best way is to check cases electronically. We Shepardize on Lexis. Now, Shepardizing on Lexis will help us find everything we need. You can also auto-cite on Lexis, which is just a quick way of making sure the case is good. Hasn't been overruled, hasn't been reversed. Gives me some other secondary sources, such as ALR, for doing my research. We may want to do KeyCite on Westlaw. Just want to show fans, I'm curious, with all due respect to our Lexis representative, how many people use KeyCite when Shepardizing, Shepardizing or checking sources? How many use KeyCite? Okay. How many go to the Shepards on Lexis? That should work out for you. Okay, they're both effective. You don't have to use both, but either one is as good as the other, and you should familiarize yourself with, don't forget, the hard book as well. With KeyCite, you know you have START, that whole STAR system, right? 4 stars, 3 stars, 2 stars, to identify sources and quotation marks, and it will include citations for both positive and negative references. Okay, so we have checking sources with hard, with books, Lexis, Westlaw. It's very imperative. You must check all sources. Now, statutes are a little troublesome for students. Students sometimes are put off by the statutes. They can be difficult to wade through. Keep in mind that the best way to do research with statutes is to go to the codes. The federal codes, of course, the federal statutes appear in the United States Code, the United States Code Annotated, and the United States Code Service, which is just a different publication of the code. And of course, again, New York State statutes appear in Kinney's Consolidated Laws in New York, and that is a reference. This you'll see New York, for example, New York General Obligation Law. It's organized by topic and by section number. Always check the pocket parts for statutes. Too many times statutes have been modified, statutes have been repealed, statutes have been amended. You must check the pocket parts to see the most recent version of the statute, and of course, to get your other secondary sources interpreting the statute and other cases as well. When researching statutory issues, I tell students all the time, your best bet is to go to the code. It's easier. It is easier to go to the code than to go to the computer. Somehow the code just make sure you're reading the statute properly, that you know what it is you're looking for. You may want to locate the statute if you don't have the citation by going to what's called a popular name table. Okay, for example, in New York, let's say you bought a car and it's a real lemon and you want to research the lemon law, but you don't know the citation. You can go to the table and look up lemon law, and that will give you the citation to the statute, and you can go to the text and read the statute. Following the statute, in addition to various references, cross-references to secondary sources, you will find the notes of decision. The notes of decision are summaries of the cases interpreting the statute. They're like head notes, they look like head notes, they're just not called head notes for some reason, but they're the same thing. They're summaries written by the editors in which the decision is summarized for the reader as it relates to the particular statutory provision that you're researching. And of course, critical again, I can't emphasize it enough, pocket parts, and pocket parts. Now, we want to maintain the highest degree of professionalism at all times. For many of you, this is your first time out there. This is the first time you're going to be putting your best professional face forward. So I urge you, maintain the highest level of professionalism possible at all times. Check your Blue Book form. If your Blue Book is sloppy, if your research is sloppy, if your presentation is sloppy, you will appear sloppy, and you cannot afford that. This is the time that you're building your reputation as an attorney. This is when it begins. And you will be remembered for a job well done, but more importantly, I'm sorry to say, you will be remembered even more so for a job badly done. So I cannot emphasize enough the need to maintain the highest degree of professionalism, integrity, ethical considerations when doing your research and when being a lawyer, which is what you will be doing at this point. So I urge you all to have a wonderful summer. I hope you enjoyed this presentation.
We're going to continue the program upstairs on the 11th floor, where you'll be participating in some hands-on interactive workshops on the research tools that Professor Kaiser just spoke to you about. There's also refreshments served upstairs. Help yourself. We'll be convening.
I just watched.
guest speaker, Janice Henderson of Baker McKenzie. Welcome. We'll get started with the final portion of our program. Just waiting for a couple of people to make their way downstairs. Ms. Henderson is a graduate of Brooklyn Law School. She's an alum, so welcome her back to school. As I said, she was kind enough to visit us and take some time off from her busy day at Baker McKenzie, where she is the Director of Professional Development and Library Services. And she is going to give us the firm's perspective on cost-effective research strategies you might employ when you find yourself in a private firm setting. And with that note, it's all up to you.
All right. Well, just to come back to Brooklyn Law School, I went to the evening. So I worked full-time and came in the evening. And 4 years seemed like, when I was in it, seemed like forever. So when it was finally over, it's over. But I decided, before I came to Brooklyn Law School, I was a law librarian. And I came to Brooklyn Law School to enhance my librarian career so that I could, when an attorney asked me research questions, I could be a little bit more, delve a little bit more into it than the average librarian, because I would know a little bit more about the background and what he's looking for, she's looking for. So one of the things that I do is train the attorneys to make sure that they do cost-effective legal research. How many of you have been trained on Lexis and Westlaw? All been trained on both those systems? Yeah. And when you've been trained and you've done your own research for your classes, how many of you have gone into like all cases to find a case from one jurisdiction, or mega file in Lexis? When you do that in the firm, you're charged every time you go into a different database on either Lexis or Westlaw. Okay, so if you went into all mega on Lexis, you were charged $118 for that one search. If you're on Westlaw, $120 for that one search. So what you want to do is you want to make sure you pick the right database to go into. So if you're looking for New York cases, don't go into all cases of mega, go into the New York cases file. Every time you do a search on Lexis or Westlaw, the first thing you have to put in before you even get into Lexis or Westlaw is you have to put in a client number. Okay, because now the client is paying for your searching on Lexis or on Westlaw. Okay, so that's the first thing you have to transfer your thinking to. It's not going to be free anymore, and I don't care which type of organization you go into, whether it's nonprofit, whether it's government, whether it's a law firm. Someone is paying Lexis and Westlaw, okay, for your searching. So you have to be a little bit more sure about what you're doing, the search terms you're putting in. Have you ever done a search on either Lexis or Westlaw and got no results? You're charged $118 if you're in a mega file, or $120 on all cases in Westlaw. Okay? Doesn't matter if you don't come up with anything. Once you hit the entity to run the transaction, to run your search terms, and you get nothing, you're still charged. Because Lexis and Westlaw, they don't care. All they know is that you clicked away and you hit the enter key. If you spell something wrong and you don't get any results, if you hit the back key, and then hit the enter key and you don't get any results, those are all mistakes on your part, typographical mistakes. But still, Lexis and Westlaw doesn't care. You're going to be charged for that search that you put in. So, before my attorneys go online, especially the new ones, the ones who don't have any experience or any knowledge of that particular research area, I want them to go into the books first. Okay, I want them to go into either New York jurisprudence or American jurisprudence, or one of the specialty treatises like the Federal Securities Law Reporter or Koch on insurance. And I want them to read. I want them to get the basic information so they can come up with the right search terms to put into Lexis or Westlaw and go from there. Okay, but you have to have some knowledge. You don't want to get your knowledge on Lexis or Westlaw, because as you know, as you can see, you're being charged every time you go on. Now, my attorneys get two IDs. They get a transactional ID, and they get an hourly ID. Now, you're probably in Westlaw, you're probably used to the hourly ID. As soon as you go online, you're being charged per minute. So again, 11.71 minutes, $11.71 per minute on the mega files and $11.63 on Westlaw per minute. Okay, so now we're over $300 if you're on there for an hour. So what I tell my attorneys is how to use those two IDs. If you want to go on and you want to hit a lot of different databases, you want to go into the law review database, you want to go into the cases databases, you want to go into the treatise databases, and you're just going to do sort of like a hit and miss, see what's there, not read online, but just see what you're coming up with, and maybe print off the list of citations that you receive. And you're not going to be on for more than 15 or 20 minutes, then I recommend to my attorneys to use the hourly. If you're going to hit just maybe one or two databases, and you're not going to go into mega all cases unless you necessarily have to do it, you're doing some type of state survey, then I recommend the transactional, because with the transactional, you can read online. You can read for hours online once you hit that, once you do the search and find your results. So if you pick up 50 cases and you want to read online, you can, and not charge anything extra than the transactional. Again, hourly, as long as you're on, that's how much you're charged. So most of my attorneys, though, they probably use the transactional more than they use the hourly. Most of my Lexis bills are on the transactional. The other thing with both Lexis and Westlaw, you're charged for printing. If you use the print button in the page for Lexis and Westlaw, you're charged a print fee. If you use the browser, you're not charged anything. Okay, that's free. But there's differences between the printing that you get when you use the printed Lexis and Westlaw. You won't get you'll get the dual column printing. You'll get your terms highlighted. When you use the browser, you won't get any of that information. So it depends on what you want to do. If you want to, you don't care where your search terms are, you just want to read the entire case without, seeing where your search terms are within the body of the case before you read the entire case. Because you have to read the entire case, right? You're not going to just read the synopsis that you find in the digest or anything. You still have to read the entire case. Then you want to use the browser if necessary. There's a couple of fees with the printing. If you do a Lexi or if you do a fine, you're automatically charged $5. So if you have a case citation, you go in and pull up the case on the screen, that's a $5 fee. If you decide to print on the Lexis or Westlaw print button, then you're charged another $5. So normally the print out a case or a statute, a law review article, it's a $10 charge if you use the Lexis and Westlaw print button. So again, this is something else. So you don't want to go in and print off all 100 cases that you picked up on your search, okay? Because your client is going to be charged for that printing, or at least the Lexi or the finding of the cases or the statutes that you're picking up. Any questions about that? When I first came to Baker McKenzie, and I'll put in a little plug for Baker McKenzie, where you're either, depending on where you read in the surveys, we're the largest or the second largest law firm in the world. So I have over 3,000 attorneys that I can potentially work for, because there are libraries all over the world, but my specialty in New York may be what the attorneys need, so they'll call my library to get the information. But when I first came to Baker McKenzie, one of the first things I was hit with was the summer associates program was just over. I came in in August. I was hit with a $10,000 Lexis charge because one of the summer associates, instead of doing, when they got their search, instead of doing a focus on modifying of the results that they received, they kept saying new search. Oh, that's not good. That's too many cases. New search, new search, new search, new search, new search. Every time you hit the new search button on Lexis, or put in .ns, or do you know the documents? Yeah, it's probably before your time. But anyway, whatever database you're in, you're hit with another fee. Okay, so in order not to get hit with multiple fees like that, you start with a relatively broad search, and then use the focus function in order to narrow down the cases that you're looking for, the statutes that you're looking for. Westlaw is set up a little differently in that every time you add a term, they consider that a research and you're hit with another fee. Okay, so you have to have all this in your mind before you get online. And before you get really familiar with the subject that you're researching, the area of the law that you're researching. The more experienced you are, then you know where to go. But as what I call newbies, you'll need to do some research. Think before you go online. Put your search strategy down before you go online. If you think of a search strategy and when you get online and nothing's happening, get off. Sign off and start over again and rethink your research. Okay, but again, you don't want to do research, because at the end of summer, you're looking for a job and they say, oh my God, Amy Jones just spent $10,000 that we can't charge to our clients. Okay, so the firm is going to have to pay for that. You don't want to leave that impression at the end of your summer. Okay, so I don't want to scare you like, oh my God, I'm not going to use Lexis or Westlaw again. Okay, you have to use Lexis or Westlaw. There's definitely instances where you have to use it. There's not a library, a legal library, or in a law firm or nonprofit or government that has every book that's ever printed that you can go to the shelf and pull the book off the shelf. Okay, not that many law firms have all 50 state statutes. Not that many law firms have all the regional reporters, along with all the other types of reporters that West puts out. It just doesn't happen. So you're going to have to go on, you have to use Lexis or Westlaw, but you have to use it efficiently. Okay, so you have to be careful in the beginning of your search terms. Ask the librarian, ask another associate, ask your mentor in your firm, am I doing the right thing? Am I getting the right results? Then you'll be fine. You'll be fine. Okay? Okay. We'll talk about that. There are additional databases out there that are sort of competitors of Lexis and Westlaw. You've probably heard of LoisLaw.com. Granted, it's not as extensive as Lexis or Westlaw. It doesn't go back as far in the case databases. But for current law, it's pretty good. And you might come to a law firm or an organization that will have LoisLaw.com. And with LoisLaw.com and Versus Law, that I'm going to talk about also, these are flat fee databases. So every time you go on, you're not charged for client searches. So you might go into a law firm or a large law firm that might have LoisLaw.com for nonprofit type of searching. Because believe it or not, large law firms do have attorneys doing nonprofit work. Or, you might want to explore a little bit, go on to LoisLaw.com if you have that available to you, and then go on to Lexis and Westlaw to see if there's anything more current than what's in LoisLaw.com. But their database is pretty current. It's 24 to 72 hours so that they get cases on their databases from the court. So that's pretty good. That's pretty good. In Versus Law, I like Versus Law, especially if you're in a very, very small law firm, maybe it's a 10-man law firm, a 5-man law firm, because you can go on and you can get a 24-hour plan for $14.95. Okay, that's great. So if you're doing research for a particular client and that client can't afford a lot of fees, you can go onto Versus Law and say, okay, for a 24-hour period, or I'm not expecting you to search for 24 hours, but for that time period, you can do as much searching as you want, and all the client will have to pay for is that $14.95. So that's a pretty good deal in Versus Law. The places where you'll be going to may have web subscriptions. Like I said, there's no library that's large enough to have every legal book that's ever been published. Not even the Library of Congress has that much space anymore. So, especially in Manhattan, New York City, prices are premium, $60 a square foot in most Manhattan locations. That's quite a bit, and so you don't want a large library, or at least the partners don't think of a large library with books on the shelf as an efficient way to use that space. So they may, in the past few years, libraries have shrunk in space, and the way to combat that is to go to web subscriptions to replace the books electronically. So CD-ROM used to be the catchphrase, the great format, but people are moving away from CD-ROMs. In fact, I may have maybe 2 or 3 titles on CD-ROM in my library. We've moved to the web subscriptions because it's like searching the internet. It's much easier, and I don't have to have a tower of massive CD-ROMs. I don't have to have like a 1,000 tower CD-ROM to hold all the CDs. Plus, the attorneys, when they're at home, they can get into the network, the firm's network, and get into this, the site to do their research. So they don't have to be in the office if they don't want to. So that's a plus for web subscriptions. But anyway, this is one of our subscriptions. Commerce Clearinghouse is the publisher of Federal Securities Law Reporter. This is a definitive tool for attorneys who are in the securities area. This would be maybe one, if you have a certain securities questions, this would maybe be one of the sources that I would send you to. And you don't have to worry about online costs because the library has paid for this, like an annual subscription, like if the books were on the shelf, except for it's on the web, okay? So, no printing charges. Well, yes, some printing because you have to print to your printer. But it's not like a $10 charge every time you want to print out a case, okay, or a statute or a regulation. So one of the things you should do is to make sure when you go into your library's organization's library to find out what web subscriptions they have and go there first. Usually with treatises, and a publisher has their own website like this, it's no more up to date than what's on Lexis. Okay, in fact, it's probably more up to date on the vendor's website than it is on Lexis because Lexis has to get the information, massage the information, or Westlaw has to get the information, massage the information, put it in their own format, okay? Whereas you can go directly to the vendor for their subscription, for their information. Another subscription we have is actually, we've bought from Lexis certain databases, and one of the databases is American Law Reports. Are you familiar with this reporter? Litigators use it quite a bit. And so, actually my attorneys are going through Lexis.com to get to the American Law Reports. But again, they don't have to charge their client because it's a subscription that I bought through Lexis.com. Okay, so you'll find that more and more where law firms might buy pieces of Lexis and Westlaw so that, the attorneys are used to having those books on the shelf, but, the space has been taken away. Now, why should the client pay for something that the firm has decided they didn't want to have the space for the books? Okay, so this is another way to do it. And so my attorneys have access to American Law Reports through Lexis.com. They also have Matthew Bender treatises. Matthew Bender is a publisher, now part of LexisNexis actually. They put out treatises on specific areas of the law, and you can see the listing here of the topics that they have. I would never be able to get all the publications that they have on my shelves. It would just be too expensive. But because I bought a piece of Matthew Bender through Lexis.com, my attorneys have access to more information than they would if I, from my library, books on the shelf. Because I had a few of these titles, but I didn't have all these titles. So for the occasional use, one of my attorneys has an immigration question. Well, we don't do immigration law, but maybe one of our clients would like, something on immigration. Well, they have access to the immigration titles that Matthew Bender puts out. They wouldn't have had that. Because I wouldn't have bought that from my library because no one would use the immigration treatises in my library, at least not enough to buy it. These are all the topics. If you picked a title, say, doing business in the United States, again, you're on Lexis.com, so it's a treatise, so you can either do a word search or you can do what I call the trickle-down method, in that you can you're interested in chapter 1, political, economic context, and business climate, then you click on that and you get all the sections of that particular chapter. So there's a couple of ways to do searching on the treatises. I have to say that a lot of my attorneys do not really like doing research with treatises online. People like to flip through a book, let's face it. I like to flip through a book. Books are not going to go away, but in some instances, this is the best way for the attorney to get a hold of the information and for your client. Granted, we want to make money from our clients, but we don't want to bilk them, okay? So we want to make sure that my attorneys get as much information as possible, as cost effectively as possible, as cheaply as possible. Because when you do your Lexis or Westlaw searching, or you do searching in new databases, the client is being charged for your Lexis and Westlaw searching, plus your time. Okay? So if it takes you, 2 hours to find some information for your client, and you search an hour on Lexis and Westlaw, which I hope you don't, but if you do, and you made a mistake in your hourly database, hourly ID, and you just spent like almost $600 using your hourly, the client's going to be charged that. Plus your 2 hours, you might be charging your client $250, $200 an hour. The client's being charged that also. Now it's up to the partner to say, oh, wait a minute. I'm not going to charge my client, an hour for Westlaw searching, which, could be quite a bit because you made a mistake in doing your hourly ID. Or it took you too long to find the information. When you're a first-year associate, you're expected to take a long time because you're new. You don't know all the parameters, so they expect you to take a long time to find the information, but at the same time, you're not going to charge the client that entire amount of time that you used to find the information that the attorney, your partner, your senior associate asked you to find. But when you become a second or third year, fourth year attorney, then all that's in the back of your mind. The charges that the firm is charging the client. We charge for photocopying. We charge for postage. We charge for faxing. The database charges. All that gets charged to the client, and then it's up to the partner to say, yay or nay, I'm going to reduce it a little bit, because we want to keep that client. Okay, the whole idea is to keep the clients. But normally, if you've done your job correctly, the client is going to be charged for all of that. Okay. There are also specific databases. So my tax attorneys, they might not go onto Lexis in the tax files all the time, unless they're looking for cases. But if they're looking for new things that are happening with the IRS, the Treasury Department, they would go here. They would look at tax notes today, every day. They would automatically go on in the morning when they get in to find out what what Congress did yesterday, what the Treasury Department did yesterday, what new revenue rulings have been decided, what new letter rulings have been decided. They would go onto this website. And again, we don't charge a fine for this because this is information that the attorneys need for current information. Okay? Without that, the attorney is not that expert if they don't know what's going on. So you can't really charge a fine for that type of knowledge. The other ways, besides going into Lexis or Westlaw, is to go onto the internet. Free EDGAR is not really free anymore. And does everyone know what EDGAR is? Okay, the Securities and Exchange Commission, for public companies, every public company has to file certain forms every year. They have to file a 10K, which is a financial annual report. They have to file quarterly reports. They have to file, if someone buys 20% of a stock, they have to file, that person has to file a form with the SEC. So public companies are really regulated because we don't want to be taking around money. Like if I buy stock in a company, I want to make sure that the people who are running that company are not giving me a spin on what they're actually doing and how much they're making, because I want to make money from the stock. So the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission, requires public companies to file forms throughout the year, and also at the end of the year. Private companies, you don't get that. You don't have to file any information at all for the private companies. But anyway, one of the things that my securities attorneys ask for all the time are annual reports, 10Ks, 10Qs. If I went on to Lexis or Westlaw, I would be charged $25 to get a copy of a 10K. But if I go onto a site like this, I would be able to get the document for free. Free EDGAR, though, like I said, is not really free anymore. You can still get the basic information. You can still search by either the client, the company name or the ticker symbol. You can also get a list of the documents that they recently filed. But when you want to print out the document, see on the left, the right-hand side there, the table of contents. You have to print each section at a time. Well, these documents are numerous. I mean, have numerous pages. So no one's going to sit there and print off section by section. So Creator is not that free, but there's another website called Everscan, put out by Pricewaterhouse, that does Coopers, that does the same thing that Creator used to do. So one of the things I do is I bring my attorneys over here and say, if you want just a 10K or 10Q, or if you ask the library for it, we're going to get it up on this site to save the client money for that document. Plus, I can email this document to the attorney, so I don't have to really physically print it off in the library. I can email it to that client, that attorney, and that attorney can email it to the client if they want to. So that's what this is here. And you can also get it in the document in rich text or KML, which they say here is experimental. But I just looked at the company Microsoft to get this information. And this is sort of like the first page is how it's printed off of Everscan. The SEC has their own website, and when they first put it up, it was just horrible. There wasn't enough lines going in. You would have to wait a long time even to get to this part to do research. But they've improved it over the last couple of years, and they allow you to do simple searches or free text or internet, so you can actually do Boolean searching on it by using the way you search on the internet, by either putting in a phrase with quotes around the words or putting a plus sign before terms that you really want to have in your document. You can do that now on the website. So this is another place to come to get those documents, except for the printing is not very good. The printing is like the way the company downloaded to the SEC. So it's not pretty. It's hard to read. I mentioned to you forms that people have to file with the SEC. These 13 Gs, this is what you would have to file if you bought 20% of Microsoft. Okay, that means you're a beneficial owner of Microsoft, and that means other things like taxes and things like that, and your influence on the company, things like that. So the government wants to know if you have 20%. The other place that is still on Lexis and Westlaw that you will find for free is the Secretary of State database from New York. A lot of the states have put their Secretary of State information online. And this is their company information too. So if you're registered to do business here in New York State, you have to file with the Department of State for New York. Get your company registered. And the last time I went on this page was April 7th. I like this information that they actually tell you how current, when was the last time they updated the page. So if I went on today, it would say May 28th was the last time they updated the information, which is more current than you would find on Lexis or Westlaw. That's the other thing you need to know and ask your librarian, find out from the Lexis or Westlaw 800 numbers when they updated these databases. The cases in the statute, you know, it's pretty current, 24 hours to 48 hours depending on the court, and the same thing with the statute, it's very current. But with the other types of information on Lexis and Westlaw, they have to pull the information from the official site or from the official vendor and get it to them. So it might take a little longer. But you know with the New York State that it's updated every day. So the type of information you'll find here is, if I had to serve process on a company, what address you would get from that information. The registered agent, the chairman, principal executive office, all this you would, if you went on Lexis or Westlaw, you would be charged for this information. Okay. Other types of things you might be charged for going on Lexis and Westlaw, you're definitely charged for getting this information, but this is from the Cornell site. And if you're, especially if you're a small law firm, and you don't get the pamphlets that come out annually, because they're $40, $45, $50, your firm say, well, we don't want to use our money someplace else. You know that there's a website that gives you the federal rules that you can search and get the information that you need. Again, it's not as convenient as having a pamphlet that comes out every year. but you still get the source and it's still free. And that's the important thing. You still get the information that you need for your client. Legislation. Again, a lot of the states have their own bills and laws online. Instead of paying Lexis and Westlaw, this is the official site, so this is updated before any place else to get bills and laws. So every time they amend a bill, you will find it here on this website. So again, before you jump on a cost a database that charges you, ask your librarian or someone in your firm if there's some place that you can go to get the same information. New York City Council, their laws are now online. So New York City laws are now online for the last 3 or 4 years for this official site. So I'm going to leave you with a couple of tips. First of all, know the prices. Know which if you have 2 IDs on Lexis and Westlaw, know which one is the most cost-effective way to do the research. Okay. If there's a less expensive database in your firm, use that first. Also, select the database as specifically as possible. Don't go for the mega databases or the all cases databases. Go for the database that you really want the information from. And also time management. If you're on the internet because you want to save your client money, but you spend hours looking on the internet, which we all know we can spend hours looking on the internet, and it takes you maybe 5 to 10 minutes to go on Lexis and Westlaw, go on Lexis or Westlaw. Okay? Remember, your client is being charged for your time, so don't go in the other direction. I want something free and not be able to be efficient about your time, what you're going to charge your clients. It's a basic waste of your time to do that. So you want to go to the official sites on the internet whenever possible, but at the same time you want to think to yourself, even though it's an official site, they haven't updated that site in a week. I know Lexis is updated, within 24 hours. That's the place I want to go because you still want to have enough information. You want to get the most current information for your client because God forbid if you go to court and you didn't find that case because you went, a free site as opposed to going to a site that you'll get the most current information. You don't want to do that. Can you see malpractice somewhere in your future if you do that? Okay? Because people sue each other all the time now. It's no longer the good old boy system where, you get a client, they stay with you forever, and they never leave you. Ha! Okay, the 80s are over. This is now, we're in the 21st century, and clients are jumping firms constantly. Okay? So your partner, when they look at your bill, and this is not just for you, but for every associate under their jurisdiction, so to speak, they look at the bills that they charge their clients. And if they feel that the firm should eat some of their costs so that they can keep the client so that client can come back to them with another issue, well, that's what they have to do. Let's face it, you have to pay my salary, okay? So I'm not making money from clients, although I do charge my time also. But you guys are the breadwinners of the law firms or the legal department or wherever you work for. And so you want to have those clients come back. Please have those clients come back, okay? Because I want you to pay my salary. As you're working like to 12, 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm okay. But does anyone have any questions? Anyone going to one of the law firms? Oh, what years are you anyway? Are you second, third year? First. Oh, okay. Your third year. Okay. Are you going to a permanent? Oh, part. Oh, okay. All right. So that's another environment. But someone is also always paying for those Lexis and Westlaw bills. Just not your client. Okay, well, I hope the rest of your career here at Brooklyn Law School is what you expect it to be, and better. And better, yeah. And better. And I hope maybe one day I'll see one of your bright, shiny faces at the presentation.
and clinics. Their attendance was mandatory at this program. And so because there was a lot of attrition, we lost about 50% of the students, I will take an end-of-day attendance list that is over by the roses. And the top of the sheet says end of day. If you again print your name and sign your name, I will make sure that Professor Eister knows those students who gave it their all and stayed for the very enlightening discussion given by our alum, Janice Henderson. LexisNexis has kindly sponsored a wine and beer reception for us upstairs. If you feel like mixing with us, make your way back up to the 11th floor. We have some nice red and white wine champagne. Thanks again and have a good summer. You were all terrific.